Our previous video discussed the topics for our upcoming essay on realism literature. If you missed that, please go back and watch it to make sure that we're on the same essay writing page. This video will focus on the other activities that you'll be doing to prepare for the essay. After you read the essay assignment and watch the video discussing the topics, the next thing you need to do is to complete the lesson on writing about literature. Okay, so it's listed right here. Notice that Moodle labels it as a quiz, but it's really a tutorial. It contains instructional materials and examples and just asks some basic questions to ensure that students are grasping the material. It's basically a review of essay writing with some new material about how to write about literature in there. So like a tutorial, you can work through it as many times as you wish, and it's untimed. So work through it as many times as you need to make sure that you understand the material and until you make 100 on it. So just keep going until you make 100. Now, after you complete the lesson, nail down the topic you'd like to write about for the realism essay, and then do some brainstorming. Okay, for this activity, you will be uploading a worksheet on which you have brainstormed some details about your essay topic. Okay, so there are various worksheets associated with this assignment. You can access the activities in the folder just below this assignment. They're also linked within the assignment. So let me just pull this up and just briefly kind of go over these. So the activities that you have to choose from are a Venn diagram. You know, that's the circles, the overlapping circles. So there's a Venn diagram. There is a worksheet titled Applying a Literary Movement. There is a worksheet on character analysis. And then there is a cluster diagram. Okay. You know what? In fact, let's just pull up these. Let's start with the Venn diagram. The Venn diagram contains two overlapping circles. So the Venn diagram choice for the brainstorming activity would work really well if you are leaning toward doing the comparison contrast of the two Mark Twain stories, or if you are comparing and contrasting the short story with the film version of The Yellow Wallpaper. It would work really well for either of those assignments. So the way that a Venn diagram works is that the first circle represents, let's say, the jumping frog of Calaveras County. And then the second circle represents the war prayer, so the second Mark Twain story. The part in the middle where they overlap, that would be where you would put aspects that the two stories have in common. So, for example, one thing that both stories have in common is they both kind of deal with just everyday people, you know. There aren't fancy characters or anything like that. They're just real life kind of small town people in both stories. So they have that in common. In the first circle where it doesn't overlap, that's where you would put things unique to the jumping frog of Calaveras County. And then in the second circle over here, you would put things that are unique to the war prayer. So, for example, one thing that is unique to the Jumping Frog of Calaveras County is that it's a framed narrative. In other words, it's this story within a story. The war prayer is not set up like that. So you would put framed narrative over here because it isn't something that they have in common. You wouldn't put it in the middle. So that's the way a Venn diagram works. And it works well for the Mark Twain story, story comparison and contrast, or the Yellow Wallpaper film and story comparison contrast. Okay. The next one is applying a literary movement. Now, this is just set up as a chart that you can use to brainstorm some ideas. So if you're leaning toward doing the topic about applying a literary movement to a story, so for example, realism, naturalism, or regionalism, then this would be the worksheet to do to help you come up with details. So first, determine which of those literary movements best fits your story. Are you going to argue just overall that it's just this overarching realism story? Or are you going to drill down and argue that it's more specific to the pessimistic naturalism movement? Or perhaps that it's a local color type of regionalism story. So then what you would do is you would look up characteristics of that literary movement. So go back to the Realism PowerPoint video. That would really help you with this, to list some characteristics of each of those movements. You can also look online if you want to. Determine whether that characteristic is illustrated in the story that you have chosen. And if it is, how is it illustrated? So how does it come out in the story? And then finally, comment, is there anything unusual or significant about the way that the author uses that aspect of the movement? So this will give you some great ideas to write about for the essay if you want to do the one on applying the literary movement of regionalism, realism, or naturalism to one of our short stories. Okay. Let's see. The next one is a cluster diagram. So let me pull that one up. A cluster diagram is also often called a spider diagram because it kind of looks spidery, doesn't it? In the middle, you would put your topic and then anything that branches off from that. This would work really well for the topic about symbolism in the white heron. You could have symbolism in the white heron. Here in the middle is your topic. And then in the bubbles that branch off, you could have your different symbols. You actually may not have 4. You're only required to have 5 paragraphs for this essay. So you're going to have 3 body paragraphs. So it would just make sense to only talk about, 3 symbols, unless you felt like there were 4 symbols that were important and you wanted to discuss 4. But you would put your symbol here, and then in the bubbles that branch off from it, you would discuss the meaning of that symbol and why it's significant. And I think I skipped one, so let me go back to the character analysis one. Okay, so the character analysis worksheet is based on that URL that I provided on the assignment sheet for the essay. Just a great website that describes very nicely how to write a character analysis. So I used that website as the basis for this particular worksheet. So it has 2 different sections to it. In the first section, you determine the type of character that you have. And this section is just designed to get you started thinking in general terms about your character and the type of character that they are, just overarching. So if you don't know any of these definitions, you're like, well, what's a dynamic character? What's a static character? Then you can look up those definitions online, or you can go to that original article. They have some really nice definitions there to help you determine those things. So if your character is that type, then you would just note that they are that type and briefly explain why. If your character is not that type, you don't have to put anything. So if it doesn't apply to your character, just skip it. Okay, the second page lists some more detailed questions about the character. So just jot down a few sentences for each of these to answer these questions. And the questions are about motivation, actions, what do they say, descriptions, names, etc. So just jot down some ideas there to help you get started thinking about details that you can use in your character analysis essay. Okay, so let me go back to the assignment. Okay, now many of those worksheets come up in a form that you can edit. In fact, I think they're all Microsoft Word except for the cluster diagram. The way that you can complete them is to just pull up the worksheet and edit it, just edit it in Microsoft Word. Just be sure to save your changes so that you don't lose them, okay? Because you need to upload it to Moodle as your assignment submission. But another thing that you can do if you want to is to just print off the worksheet and write it up and then send me a photo of your handwriting. For many people, writing by hand actually gets their creative juices going a little bit more than typing on a screen does. So you're more than welcome to do that. As long as your handwriting is legible, that's perfectly fine. So the bottom part here just gives some instructions for how to do all of that. Now, if you choose an assignment that matches up with the cluster diagram, as I said before, it is a PDF, so it isn't editable unless you have some special software. So you may have to do that one by hand. But in actuality, if you wanted to handwrite any of these worksheets and upload photos of your handwritten pages, that is perfectly fine as well. Okay, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'll be happy to help. I can't wait to see your essay ideas.